In this video, I'm going to give you a demo of Monday.com, which is a project management platform that we've been trying out in the Language and Culture Institute. I used to get tons of annoying YouTube ads for Monday, but I'm glad I gave in because this has been a game changer for the Wóoyake Project. You can do so much from one place. We're streamlining tasks we used to do in email and Google Sheets, Dropbox, Trello, and probably 10 other platforms we were trying to keep track of. But I will also offer some critique of how Monday could be made even better, or where its intended use doesn't quite match what we're doing. But I'll start with a broad overview of how it's organized. So this is our team account, and at the top level we have what are called workspaces, and each of these is a different it's a way of separating different projects. If we go into our Wóoyake workspace, we have folders. This is our project for archiving language recordings. So this is a folder for audio-visual recordings, another one for historical written documents, and so on. And then within a folder, we have what are called boards. And in our case, each board represents a collection of recordings. For example, George Bush Otter is a collection of stories written in the 1800s, and Michael Moore and Gabe Blackmoon did a lot of work to catalogue those. Iapi o Aye is a collection of articles from a Dakota language newspaper that used to run in the old days, so we'll take a look at that. And within a board, we have groups. So in this case, it's groups of articles that we've snipped from the newspaper. We have 51 that are in progress or kind of on the go, 20 that's still unassigned, haven't been started yet in terms of cataloging. And if we expand a group, we see 51 rows. Each row here is representing an article. The names that we've given probably won't make a whole lot of sense to folks outside the project, but we've just used a unique code basically for each article. And then, a bit like Excel or Google Sheets, we have different columns, and Monday.com offers a variety of different column types. For example, the headline column uses a text column type. This one at the end uses a link column type. So we use an external platform for doing some of the textual work with these articles. So that URL takes you to the it takes you right to the page on the external platform. Then we have a person column here. This is really useful. We use it for assigning articles for users to work on. And in a minute, I'll touch on different types of users and their permissions. But right now, if you hover over, you can see their profile picture, their time zone, the user's email and phone number if they've listed it. And next to that, I've put a time tracking column. This is super useful. Users can hit the start button at the beginning of a work session to log their time, or if they forget to do that, they can come in later and add a session manually. And this has saved us so much time in terms of the freelancers who used to have to bill their time using invoices, which we're then collecting every month. Now we can just export this column as an Excel sheet, which saves us a lot of time. There is one area in which this export could be improved. It'd be nice to have a date range to export rather than exporting all of history every time we do the export. And also the layout of the export is really awkward, which makes sorting impossible without some kind of manual reformatting of the Excel sheet. Moving on, there are a few different types of boards. This one is a shareable board. There are also main boards and private boards. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a few different types of users, including members and guests. So members can see all of the main boards, plus any private or shareable boards that they've been invited to. One of the big drawbacks of Monday is that it ain't free. So you pay per user per month. So if you're a big organization, the price can rack up pretty quickly. If the user has an email domain outside the organization, you can invite them to a shareable board as a guest. And luckily for us, most of the project participants are freelancers, so we just use a bunch of shareable boards, which we invite them to as guests, and then only a few main boards for our team members. And as a board owner, I can set board permissions. So what I want users to be able to do on a board. Do I want them to be able to edit everything, including adding new columns? Do I want them to only be editing the content of rows, or the rows that they've only those that they've been assigned to, or do I want it view only? This is nice, but I think there are two big improvements Monday could make here. Firstly, there's no distinction between permissions for members and permissions for guests. I might not want freelancers to have the same level of edit access as tribal colleagues do. And also, it would be nice to have more granular options. For example, I don't want guests to be able to edit all content, but it would be cool to let them assign themselves a recording to work on if they spot one that they like in the list. But right now they have to ask to have the recording assigned to them, and then they can edit the row that they have been assigned to. A great way of interacting with users as well is using the conversations feature. What's nice is that there is one chat for every item, so it's super easy to refer back to previous conversations about a recording. You don't have to wonder, was that in an email? Was that on a Facebook message? All our conversations are in one place, and it has a really nice, rich text editor. It allows threaded comments like this. I can tag other users and they can tag me and each other. I can drag and drop different file types into the conversation, PDFs, videos, images, all of which get displayed automatically in a nice, sleek viewer. So those are great. And another feature that has actually come out since we started using Monday is sub items. I've called them tasks on this board, but basically, if we open that up, we have essentially a subboard underneath each item, and these subboards share their own set of columns. So we have another person column here. We use this to assign specific tasks within the workflow that we have with each recording. So I can assign specific tasks to specific people. There's also a couple of other column types we see here that we haven't seen yet. This one is a drop-down column type, which is a bit like text, but you're choosing from and adding to a vocabulary of labels that you might use over and over. In this case, it's names of software that is needed for each task. And we have a status column. So we have defined the labels that we need, and users can switch, change the status as and when they complete work. If I do that, we see, there's a summary of the status, summary of the progress on the parent item itself. Sub-items are really useful. They do fall short in one way, which is that whereas you can bulk import parent items by uploading, let's say, an Excel sheet to Monday, you can't do that for sub-items. So our little workaround is that we have created a template item with those sub-items kind of ready in there, and we have to manually duplicate this template every time we want to create a new item. By default, users get notifications when they are tagged in a conversation. I've also set up some automated notifications. For example, when a user changes a status, let's say from in progress to done, I get a notification that tells me I need to go in and review their work. I also get automated notifications when someone has logged their time, like we can see here. And we're only scratching the surface in terms of what can be done with automations. It's not just about notifications, but you can set up automatic item creation, you can set up automatic changes of status and so on when certain conditions get met. Going back to our board, these columns all actually belong to a larger main table. and this includes other details about the articles, such as the author, people mentioned in those articles, and if we scroll along, we see date written, places mentioned, keywords, and so on. This is all archival metadata related to the actual language recordings themselves, as opposed to our work with those recordings. And I've set up another view which is the main table kind of minus the tasks columns, which just leaves us with the metadata columns. And some of these column types we haven't seen yet. We've seen drop-down ones like this, which we use for listing the dialect of each article, but we have a couple new ones like date column type. We can put in an approximate or an exact date of when something was written. We have a keywords column which uses the tags column, and what we're doing here is kind of creating that first layer of discovery of the content before we get round to doing a full text transcription. And another column type that we see here, for example with the places mentioned column, is board connections. And board connections are a really powerful feature of Monday that allow us to turn this into a relational database. For example, check out this article, which happens to mention a bunch of different places, including Flandreau. Okay, if I take you to another board, and this is a board we use for logging our different places, we see Flandreau Reservation. And the metadata that we're recording about that place, such as the various different names that we've encountered for that place, and the coordinates for that place using Google Maps data if it's available, or for more localized places, sometimes we have to grab the coordinates. We consult an awesome mapping project that Dakota Goodhouse looks after, and if he's identified coordinates for those places, then we'll use those. But back to my point about board connections, we can see here the reciprocal reference back to that article that we were just looking at on the Iapioaia board, as well as other articles in which Flandreau is mentioned. And if we go back to our Iapioaia board, we can even preview the Flandreau entry on that places board in this little pop-up window and edit the info from here. For example, if we come across a leader who was born in Flandreau in the past, we can add their name here without even having to leave the Iapioaia board. So as you can see, this is a really powerful feature, though I have one critique, and that is that the connections can only be made between columns on two boards. So this can be a problem because, of course, Flandreau gets mentioned not only in the Iapioaia recordings, but it's going to get mentioned in our George Bush Honor recordings and our KLND radio recordings and so on. And in an ideal world, all of these recordings from various collections could be listed in a single column on the places board, but that's not possible. One last thing about board connections: a connection to an item on another board is labeled using the first column from that connected board. As we see here, it's labeling it as Flandreau Reservation. What we can also do is mirror columns from those boards. Let me go to the main table and show you what I'm talking about. Here we have that column referencing the place board, and here, right at the end, I have mirrored the coordinates column from our places board. So we have this column for the place where it was written, which sets up the connection between this board and the places board, and then this mirrored column lifts those coordinates from the places board. It has the Google Maps reference, or the coordinates if we've had to input them. And what this allows me to do is to create another view, which I've made here using the map view, and all of these points that have been plotted on the map are using the coordinates from that mirrored column via the board connection. Of course, they're mostly, these are places where the articles were created, so it's mostly focused around Lakota country, but it also gives us a visualization of how far afield, out here on the East Coast, that people were writing back home using the Lakota language. One last feature I'd like to demo is the search feature. I'm going to go back to my tasks view for this. Search a single board using text from any of the columns. So let's try out Ozuye here, and this will, filter out those rows which feature those words. And it's also pretty intelligent in terms of understanding search terms. For example, if I try out Elliot in progress, spell that right, what it does is it finds articles with tasks of mine that are still in progress. There's also a search everything tool, and this one searches across boards. So if I search Tatanka, what this does is it searches items with that word from across boards. So we can see there's results from the people board, there's results from the Iapioaya board, and so on. And I can also search updates. Updates is just another word for conversations. So this has found all of those chats from across the different boards, and I can preview those conversations, or I can jump directly to the conversations from this search results page. So all in all, Monday is a really powerful project management tool that allows us to collect and organize our data in one place. It facilitates teamwork, it lets us create these connections between data and start playing around with different ways of displaying it. But this brings me to the last limitation of Monday that I wanted to mention. It is a tool designed for organizational work behind the scenes, and I wish it had easier ways to publish the boards for public access. I know people would love to use the search function to have fun browsing the maps, but as I talked about earlier in the demo, that's not how they make their money. It's set up to provide access via paid user accounts. And of course, this is data that we are working to make public. We're just going to have to use another tool to do that, and that tool is called Drupal. Drupal takes a lot of tooling to set up the database. Setting up the content types and the fields has to be done a lot more manually than in Monday, which has these beautiful, sleek ways of organizing and presenting data. But we're getting there, and Monday has helped us a lot in terms of preparing the data to get it ready for public access, and I think it will continue to do so throughout the rest of this project. Okay, that's all for now, so thank you for listening.